do want to go ahead and wrap with a little college hoops. And so we haven't done a ton of college hoops on the Air Tours pod over the last couple of weeks for some probably pretty obvious reasons. It's football season. There's not much going on in basketball. And again, most of your focus is going to be on football. Unless you're a Notre Dame fan or Texas A&M, you probably love your football team. You're happy with where your football team's at. Never been more satisfied with your football program. And so there really hasn't been a ton of college hoops news, and there's really been no reason to talk college hoops. But what I will say is over the last couple of days, there has been something that I think kind of interesting in the college hoop space that is worth visiting, touching on, not spending 25 or 30 minutes on it like your boy Torres can do, but maybe 15, 10 minutes to just kind of give you a little recap what's going on, and that is recruiting. This past week, last Friday, was the first time that college basketball coaches can go on the road and visit recruits in person. And why this is important, it doesn't mean that anybody super significant has committed. But why it's important is because where your coach is, where they start, is usually a pretty good reflection of who the school is prioritizing at this exact moment. If they're not going to visit a kid that they have no shot with. And so I saw a couple things over the last couple of days that I thought are worth noting. I want to kind of hit on it quick, just to kind of a rapid fire 4 or 5 things that I noticed, because I do think they're significant. First of all, let's start with the guy that when we talk recruiting, it's Jon Scheyer. There's about 4 or 5 guys: Jon Scheyer, Chris Beard, Eric Musselman, and of course, John Calipari. Where did John Calipari open the recruiting period? Well, he opened it in New Jersey, home of the #1 player in America, DJ Wagner, and his high school teammate, Aaron Bradshaw. And why this is significant is for a few reasons. Listen, we've done the DJ Wagner conversation a million times. I'm not going to go deep dive. I think everybody at this point knows he's the son of DeJuan Wagner, who, of course, was the first really kind of great one-and-done player that John Calipari had back at Memphis. And he's the grandson of Milt Wagner, who was a national champion at Louisville and recently hired as a special assistant at Louisville. It's kind of in a alumni relations role, so they can still recruit DJ. And I bring it up because, again, we've gone over the story, but just give me 30 seconds to get through it. But when that hire was made, when the grandfather was hired, I do think that we all jumped to the natural conclusion, it's over. DJ Wagner is not going to Kentucky. Give it up, Kentucky fans. Move on to your next option. And in some ways, John Calipari in Kentucky did when they signed Rob Dillingham, a top 10 guard who was considered the #1 point guard in America, DJ more of a combo guard. And so I think, like everybody else, I include myself, I kind of gave up on it. And then as time started going on, you started to think, even me, even without any outside talking to this person, talking to that person, you started to think, wait a second now. How many kids have really committed to a school because of their grandfather? And you really started to wonder, was there really anything credible to everyone just assuming DJ was going to go to Louisville? Or was it just total speculation of grandfather's at Louisville, there's no way that he's going to go now? And so over the last couple of weeks, I think there's been a few things that kind of indicate that this recruitment is more wide open than maybe we initially thought. One, all the reports are saying that. A lot of these recruiting experts, and I respect the heck out of what those guys and girls do, it's no discredit, but some of them that had crystal balls in have removed crystal balls, or they're a little bit more hazy or whatever. I think, too, Kenny Payne's comments a few weeks ago, the new Louisville coach, kind of were very interesting, right? Kenny Payne, for people who missed it, I probably should have talked about it on the show. I didn't. But Kenny Payne mentioned in passing, he said something to the effect of, he was speaking at a church, which was kind of interesting. And he said that there's been a lot of negative recruiting about Louisville, and that people that he's respected, people that he's been involved with for 25, 30 years are saying bad things about Louisville. Now, I don't know if that's specifically John Calipari. It's not my place to speculate. But what it says to me is that Kenny Payne, it is more difficult to recruit at Louisville than I think that he anticipated. And I think that's especially important in the case of DJ Wagner. If you feel confident that you are about to close on the #1 high school player in America, I don't think you're going to even a local function with your own boosters and fans and saying we're having a tough time dealing with negative recruiting. So you're starting to get some feel out of the Louisville camp that maybe they're not as confident as they were 3-4 months ago. And I think you're starting to get some confidence out of Kentucky, too, of like, well, wait a second now. Why would John Calipari start in New Jersey again if he had no chance at this kid. And so right now, unless I've missed something in the last day or two, I don't know that we're going to get anything specific out of the DJ Wagner recruitment here over the next week or two. But at some point, he's going to have to start narrowing down his list and start committing. And obviously, it's going to come down to Kentucky or Louisville. And I don't know how you can't feel good if you're a Kentucky fan, again, because John Calipari was there. As it pertains to Aaron Bradshaw, in the new rankings, Aaron Bradshaw is ranked even higher than he was before. He is ranked the number 6 player in America in the latest ranking, which is an improvement. My sourcing still indicates it seems like it's Kentucky versus a professional route, probably G League Ignite. But I think Kentucky's almost in a perfect situation in this one, where if you remember, and we talked about this a few weeks ago on the show, there was a kid named Ugana Kingsley who was part of the class of 2022, reclassified, enrolled for the fall, and now he's on Kentucky's campus in what's essentially a pseudo redshirt year. I don't think he's actually going to redshirt, but I do think why it's important is because he's going to play limited minutes, and then you're really keeping him around for the 2023-2024 season. And so, yes, if you have a chance to sign a top 10 prospect, 7'1" center Aaron Bradshaw, you go ahead and do it. But more importantly, and why I think this is important, you already have the backup plan on campus. And the backup plan is pretty good. It's a 7'1" kid who was a 4-star in 2022, probably would have been a 5-star had he stayed in 2023. So Calipari was in New Jersey. I think it is a totally positive sign if you're a Kentucky fan that he feels like he's going to get DJ Wagner. I think Aaron Bradshaw is a cherry on top. If you get him, great. If you don't, that's okay because you're covered. So good week for Kentucky. If you believe in, if you believe that John Calipari would not be there unless he thought he could get DJ Wagner, it's a great, great, great week for Kentucky. Let's keep it going. Eric Musselman, Arkansas. Okay. So I guess it was Friday afternoon, my buddy Zach Kroll, who's been on this show, he writes for Aaron Torres Online, College Hoops Nut. He texted me a picture of Eric Musselman at the Cowboys training facility with Mike McCarthy and Kellen Moore. And what he saw was Eric Musselman doing Eric Musselman things. Eric Musselman, whenever he stops anywhere, he's got to pick the brains of the people that he's involved with. I know when he was in LA for a recruiting event a few weeks ago, he saw Brandon Staley, the Chargers head coach. But I bring it up because what I said to Zach was, I don't think he's there to see Mike McCarthy. I think he's there to see Ron Holland, the number 10 player in America and the top priority of Arkansas. And so to me, again, I take it as a totally positive sign for Arkansas that they are in great shape with Ron Holland because of the fact that is where Eric Musselman started the recruiting period on Friday. Again, if you're a head coach, if you have to pick your priority recruit for the class of 2023, where do you want to be to let that recruit know that you are their top priority? You want to be there and you want to be, front row seat so he knows how important you are to him. Now, I think a lot of Kentucky fans still think that Ron Holland is a priority for Kentucky as well, and he is. John Calipari, as I'm recording on Monday night, is in Dallas himself to see Ron Holland. But I think if you're an Arkansas fan, you have to feel really good about Eric Musselman being in Dallas to see Ron Holland. For people who don't know, a couple things. One, kind of a 6'8" or so wing. I really like his game. He's a kind of guy that has thrived in the Eric Musselman system, which I think is what Arkansas is selling him in recruiting. If you followed Eric Musselman for a number of years, Moses Moody, of course, first-round draft pick 2 years ago, played 1 year at Arkansas in the SEC during that COVID season, plays 1 year in the NBA, or 1 year at Arkansas, ends up being a lottery pick, 1 year in the NBA, ends up being an NBA champion with the Golden State Warriors. Also, a couple guys like that when Eric Musselman coached at Nevada with Cody and Caleb Martin. So he fits the Eric Musselman prototype, and he played at the same high school as Anthony Black, a current freshman at Arkansas. And so when I look at this situation, what it says to me, the fact that Eric Musselman is there, the fact that there's natural ties, the fact that one of his high school teammates plays at Arkansas. I know Kentucky fans think that this kid will end up being in Kentucky. I do tend to think that he probably ends up being at Arkansas, especially keep in mind, Kentucky has gotten a commitment from a wing named Justin Edwards. You should know the name. He's been on the Aaron Torres podcast. But Justin Edwards is a Wildcat. My hunch is that in the end, Ron Holland ends up as an Arkansas Razorback. I think Eric Musselman being there is a great sign for Arkansas. Let's keep it going. A couple other notes. One, I thought it was interesting where Chris Beard was on Saturday. Chris Beard, the head coach of Texas. He was back at Texas because they had a home football game, and a priority recruit for them was on campus, Andrej Stojakovic, who is the son of Peja Stojakovic. He is a kid that plays for the Compton Magic, a high school AAU program I'm pretty familiar with here in the LA area. He lives in the Bay Area. Obviously, his father is Peja, played for the Sacramento Kings. This kid is a really, really, really good player. Okay, so this kid is a really, really, really good player. About 6'8", 6'9". Peja was a little bit of a guy that he was a guy that, sorry, I'm looking something up here really quick. But Peja was a kid that Peja was a guy that was more of a wing, a 3-point shooter, all that. Andrej is a kid that is a 3-level kid. He can shoot it, but I think people respect the shooting so much they underappreciate the playmaking. I've seen him. He's just a smart basketball player, gets to his spots, kind of, he's one of those guys, he's not super athletic, but he always seems to find his way to the spot that he needs to be. He was at Texas on Saturday for the Alabama-Texas game. And so I think it speaks to Texas really believing they're in pretty good shape, the fact that Chris Beard was back on campus with him for that Alabama game. Obviously, any good basketball coach is going to use a big football weekend as a recruiting tool. Chris Beard does it to a T. Number 1 Alabama is in town. Andrej Stojakovic is there as well. The only thing I would note on Andrej is that I do believe that, listen, he's cut his list to 6: Duke, Oregon, UCLA, Texas, Virginia, and Stanford. And I will say, my understanding, again, being on the West Coast, I think it's either going to be UCLA or Stanford. Stanford, obviously, academically, you can't undersell it. But I think that they do like that UCLA, LA, I guess it's a Pac-12 vibe. Although I think, by the time he gets there, they're going to be on their way to the Big Ten. But I think they like the West Coast thing. My guess is he ends up at UCLA. But the fact that he was at Texas on a big recruiting weekend, it can't be anything but a positive for Chris Beard. Finally, the last note that I do want to mention, Isaiah Collier, a really interesting prospect in 2023. Some recruiting services actually moved him up to the number 1 player in the country. He's now the number 4 player in the country, according to the 24/7 database. He was actually, who was in to see him? A number of coaches, but an interesting one, Wes Miller, the head coach at Cincinnati. By the way, should mention, point guard, 6'4", really talented player. But I bring it up because, this kid's recruitment is very wide open. And I think that he's visited Michigan. He's visited the LA schools, UCLA and USC. I don't think anybody feels like they have a great feel for where he ends up. Alabama, another school that's in the mix. But I think Cincinnati thinks that they have a really good shot with this kid. 5-star prospect, point guard, combo guard, might be the best player in high school basketball, depending on who you ask. But the fact that, again, Cincinnati's head coach opened the recruiting period in Georgia tells you that they believe that they have a shot with this kid. So keep an eye on this one. Again, he's one of those kids. I don't think that he's near a decision. Maybe he's a spring decision. And I do think that all the schools recruiting him, I think they're all kind of in the dark of where is he really interested in? Where would he go? Where would he not go? But the fact that Wes Miller was on campus to see him, I think is a good sign if you're a Cincinnati fan.